Insurance is not knowing if you have coverage when your car bumps a hot dog cart that hits a fire hydrant that floods your car. TD Insurance is confidence your coverage fits your needs. Graduates and professionals could save $680 by bundling home and car insurance. Avoid insurance and get a quote at tdinsurance.com.
Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to One Child Abuse Survivor to Another Restoration. My name is Laura Ann Smith. I'm glad to be here. And this is just a half-an-hour show. It's really just one survivor to another, looking at morning reflection, positive reinforcement, what can we do to kind of help ourselves, coping mechanisms, things like this. It's Monday morning, May 15th, 2017. I missed my show on Friday, just with a bit of a flu bug of some type. It was horrible. And had to take a day off from work and just wasn't feeling well, so I actually took that day to just rest and sort of get better. So I'm feeling a lot better this morning. Glad to be back. Glad to be doing these shows. This is a big part of my healing journey. I've done 1,100 some shows here, more than that, but I lost a few over the years, and I did another 500 over on Dreamcatchers for Abused Children for a long time there, and so yeah, this is part of my healing journey really, and hopefully you're getting something out of this too. I appreciate everybody's taking the time to listen. Sometimes I forget to say that. There's so many people who have taken the time to listen to my shows, and I'm hoping that if you're a survivor of abuse, that you get something out of it. And for others, just to sort of information session on what it is to be abused and to grow up in abuse and to then have to pick up the pieces, and learn how to care for ourselves and learn, sort of what we go through trying to deal with coping and getting through the day-to-day journey after in the aftermath of abuse, right? So thanks for being here. I appreciate it. This show is brought to you by CDAT Radio, produced by Tony Angelo. And Tony Angelo, he does some great work. He's a friend of mine, and he's recently sort of picked me up to help promote my work. And I hope that you'll take a look. That's what he does. He networks, and he's an awesome guy. I hope you'll check his stuff out. The links are on the episode info page, or right with the show just below. So we'll get right into this. So I want to look at a morning reflection. How am I doing this morning? I'm feeling actually pretty good, not bad. I feel a lot better since I've kind of gotten over that flu bug. I was pretty sick for about 4 days. Morning reflection. How am I doing on my healing journey? Any particular things I need to work on? Well, I got through Mother's Day, which is really good. Mother's Day is a crippling day for me as far as my emotions go. My mother was my main abuser, and the CSA child sexual abuse that I suffered as a child, which she did nothing to stop or get me any help, and allowed it to continue. CSA incest, from my brother, who was 13 years older than me. He was 21 and I was 8. Made me barren. Caused me to have a lot of scar tissue, which then caused me to not be able to have children. And so Mother's Day is not a good day for me, but I don't like to ruin it for other people. So I generally stay by myself, and I don't do a lot of social networking, and I don't do a lot of interacting with people. Me and my husband had a nice day yesterday, and just relaxing, taking it easy. And I did a lot of inflection. I actually did some work in a workbook called Healing. The Healing or the Wounded Heart, Hope for Adult Victims of Childhood Sexual Abuse. This is by Dr. Dan B. Allender, and there's a book and then the workbook that goes with it, and so far I'm finding it very helpful. I'm about, maybe 1/5 of the way through, and so far so good. So I am making some progress. I'm glad that I'm actually working on things. I didn't have such a meltdown yesterday, being Mother's Day. It wasn't a meltdown day for me as it used to be before I started my healing journey. And I was able to work through some feelings. Still have a lot of work to do, but just working on what I need to do to take care of myself, stay in the present, allow myself to feel what I need to feel when I need to feel it, but not stay there and not allow myself to go into a pit of darkness or despair, like I used to. I did really well yesterday doing that, and so I'm getting better, but it's just taking time, and I have to work on it. It's not something I can just put off or just leave to the side, and I definitely have to focus and concentrate on it. So that's kind of where I'm at this morning. I think I did good. I actually survived it and did quite well. So a lot better than usual, so I'm happy about that. That shows me that I'm making progress. So it's nice to take this look to see where we're at and how much progress we're making and whether or not we really doing the things that we need to do, and how am I feeling? Pretty good, pretty positive. I feel a lot better this week so far. And so, yeah, this is looking good. I'm hoping for a good week. I hope it's a good week for you, too. So we'll look at you have to, if you're a survivor of abuse, do a safety checklist. Make sure that you're safe enough really to be listening to this show or anything like this, right? Anything to do with abuse or child abuse or any kind of abuse or violence or anything like that, or whatever's going to make you uncomfortable, because survivors of abuse, if you don't know where you're at in your safety level, then you could be triggered, and then that you could be triggered and go backward in your healing journey, and that you don't want. Nobody wants that. So check that information out. You can get it from ASCA, Adult Survivors of Child Abuse Amora Center program, and they have a Safety First Survivor to Thriver manual, Safety First chapter, which is like 60 pages long. I read the whole thing, and several times actually. And it's good to read and look at it, because if you're not sure where you're at in your healing journey and how far you've come and whether or not this type of thing is going to trigger you, you need to get that information first. So just turn the show off. You won't be hurting my feelings at all. So we're moving into Adult Survivors of Sexual Abuse. It's an acronym from this lady, Cheryl, from HAVOCA, HAVOCA, Help for Adult Victims of Child Abuse, HAVOCA.org. I did put the link in the chat room there. She said at the beginning of this that, it's not just for child sexual abuse survivors. This could be from anybody who's survived any abuse. It's just that she used the letters for adult survivors of sexual abuse to do this acronym. So I think it's really cool. So the next letter is S in abuse, in the word abuse. Seek comfort from your loved ones. Embrace in their love and let it heal you inside. Grow in their strengths. Become stronger. Become like the willow tree that bends in the wind instead of breaking. So I read that and I like it. I think, well, that's nice, that's good. To me, I immediately what comes to my mind is the fact that, seek comfort from your loved ones, embrace in their love, and let it heal you inside. Grow in their strength, become stronger, become like the willow tree that bends in the wind instead of breaking. I think that's nice, Sometimes people don't have anybody to help them to get through their stuff, Like my husband's very helpful. He can't really help me in my abuse recovery, except for to be a support, because he's terminally ill, and he knows my story. We talked about some of it yesterday, actually, and he's so sick that if he gets too upset, he literally gets like nosebleeds and stuff because he's terminally ill, and he just doesn't have any strength. He's getting around, but it's hard for him, he's day to day, really, he's very sick. So I don't like to burden him with my pain, you know what I mean? He's already in enough pain as it is. And so his is not emotional pain. It's a physical pain. But I don't want to then cause him to be emotionally distraught over my situation. So I don't quite often talk to him about my stuff, but he does know what I'm doing. He knows. He's very supportive. He knows when I'm working on my healing journey. He knows what I've been through, and so he's very supportive in that. And he's very loving and caring, and he's very strong for me on my behalf. Even though he's terminally ill, he's a bit worried about me because he worries that if he does end up going before me, he's worried about me, right? And I want to show him that I'm going to make it. See. Because I don't want him worrying about me. That's the last thing I want. And so it keeps me strong because I have to be strong, And even though he knows I have difficulties with a lot of things, he knows that I'm going to keep working at it, and it kind of helps him to feel a little better. But some people don't have anybody. See, for years I didn't have anybody in my life that I could, especially my, I'd say, I don't know, late 20s. I went for a period of years where just struggling, even in my 30s a bit, when we had separated, me and my husband. We separated for 5 years. And I just found it, sometimes you just don't have a loved one, to help us to heal inside, to help us to grow in strength and become stronger, So that statement there, when I see statements like that, it kind of bothers me, because because there are a lot of people out there, a lot of survivors of abuse, men and women, who have no one, So what I tell you, coming from somebody who's kind of been there for a while myself, feel really quite on my own, is you have to find something within yourself that it's almost better that way. Because when I had a 5-year break, my husband and I sort of separated for 5 years, and I was on my own for 5 years, and that's when I started the healing journey. I started this when we were separated, and it allowed me to learn to love myself, to rely on myself, and that I could do this, and that once I started my healing journey, that I didn't really want to rely on somebody else for that comfort, because that's too easy, because that loved one may not be there. Something could happen, if it's friends or whatever, or if it's our family. Quite often we don't have any family that's loving. That's my case. Even though my family, they are who they are. As far as adults go, my adult siblings, there's 2 of them left, and they're awesome in their own right. We are so toxic together, we can't even be in the same room for very long before it starts heading in a very bad direction. So, and including me, see, because we are all so toxic from the abuse, right? So there's no care or comfort there. So many times we don't have loved ones who can do this for us. So what's even better is to seek comfort really from your higher power, whoever your higher power is, and seek comfort from from what you can find. I think actually that makes this journey and this past of ours that's so horrible. Seek whatever it is, I would say, that keeps you going, so that something good can come out of the abuse. That was my whole thing, because I watched my family suffer. It wasn't just me. My siblings paid a dear price for this abuse that my parents inflicted on them. 2 of my siblings committed suicide, one by hanging, one by drug overdose, and then the rest of them were just so messed up. Even though on the outside they looked all right, a couple of them anyway, but a couple of them just, one died. One was supposedly murdered, but we're not sure about whatever happened with that situation. But one of my siblings, my oldest sister, who was 18 years older than me, on the outside looked great. On the inside was just a crumbled shell, and suicidal, which really nobody in our family wants to talk about. But the issue is that she was, and horrible. And then myself, suicidal ideation, a lot of problems. So I just watched this horrific situation and, realized after I started my healing journey, something good has to come out of this. Something good has to come out of this. I can't just go out. When I was young, I thought that I should just go out in some sort of horrific accident or some sort of terrible death, because that's how I lived my life, right? I was brought up in this horrible situation of a lot of pain and a lot of trauma. So I kind of thought that that's how I should end my life, And then when I started my healing journey, I thought, no, something good has to come out of this, And so that's where it keeps me going, because it's my fight. Because if I do good and I treat myself well and I love myself and I care about myself, I comfort myself and I do the right things by myself and the people around me, then I win the fight. My abuser parents did not, and my brother who raped me did not win this fight. I win. See, so that's where my inner strength comes from. It's also because of my higher power, which I'm a Christian, and I don't share that much on this show because I know I used to have real problems with God and Christianity until my later years, and so I don't share my Christian walk here on this show. Because I know I had problems with God. I hated him, and I cursed him in the backyard. I used to curse him for not being there, for allowing me to be abused and leaving me in a home with my mother who hated my guts. I just, it was absolutely horrific. So, I would say find that's something in you that causes that fight to become stronger and stronger, right? So it's more important, I think, to do that than it is to try to seek some sort of comfort from somebody around us. Right, because that's not lasting. That could change. Right, people change. people, they're just people. They can't help it. Or something might happen to that person, and then they're no longer there. Then what are we going to do? I would say to keep looking for whatever it is on the inside of yourself to become stronger, to win this fight and win this battle. Really, it was not even our fault. That wasn't started by us, and then we're left to pick up the pieces, right? And I'm thankful to be on this end of it, because it's a hard road. But I'm glad that I'm on this end of it, because I know where my strength comes from now. It's from the inside. It's not from the outside. And so I think what she said here is nice, but I think it's more important to seek comfort from our higher power and grow and learn how to become strong within ourselves, you know what I mean, so that we're not relying on outside influences to try to help comfort us, because that can be very fickle, and it can be fleeting. It can come and go, right? So I like what she has to say. That's fine. So we'll move on. I just want to finish up this one section that we're looking at called Attitudes. It's from Hovoka, Help for Adult Victims of Child Abuse, Hovoka. And we already looked at flashbacks, trust, and inner child healing. Now we're looking at attitudes, and we're almost done. And this is the one where these inner abuser messages come that might play through our mind, like especially if we've done something wrong or made a mistake or whatever. This inner parent, inner critical parent, or inner abuser, whatever you want to call it, toxic voices in our head that might tell us things like, oh, we're stupid, we can't do anything right, whatever this voice tells us, right? And sometimes it's from our past, sometimes it's just ourselves doing it. I usually hear my mother's voice, because I remember she was always ranting at me, especially when she was beating on me, and sort of beat it into me, this rant that she would throw out at me all the time. And that plays around in my head all the time, especially when I'm not feeling well or something's going wrong or something comes up that's just very stressful. All of a sudden that's there again, and then I have to negate it and say, no, I did not deserve that. So what we looked at on last Monday, because I didn't do a show Friday, says you may be blaming yourself directly by telling yourself or others, quote unquote, I caused the abuse, or maybe more subtle, such as I was a seductive child, or I was always causing trouble, for instance. Self-blame perpetuates feelings of depression, anger, shame, and low self-esteem. So it says it just perpetuates it. So it says, if you believe you were somehow to blame for the abuse, then healing will be very difficult. So they said, to break the pattern of self-blame, you need to let yourself off the hook. Right? You can do this by telling yourself that you weren't to blame for the abuse, that you were a child at the time. They said there's no justification for an adult to abuse a child. Now, everybody knows this. But why it's still happening, I don't know, because people just want to abuse their children, right? That's absolutely horrific. Child abuse is against the law, they said. So here's the next part that I want to pick up, and then this section's done. It says, if you're still having trouble believing this, that that we're to, in other words, we're not to blame. It wasn't our fault, none of it. Then they said, name a child that's the same age you were when you were abused. Now imagine the abuse happening to that child. And they said, do you hold that child responsible for the abuse? No, of course you don't. As adults, we easily forget the abuse through the eyes of a child and remember it as though we were adults. Telling yourself that you were not responsible for the abuse doesn't mean you are not responsible for changing how the abuse affected you. As an adult, you need to take responsibility for your problems by seeking help and changing destructive patterns of behavior. That's right, and that's what happened to me. When I started my healing journey, I realized that I was going to have to do some work, and it was going to have to me to do it. I couldn't just keep repeating the same old behavioral patterns from the abuse, and I needed to do the work and change change the way I felt about myself, because I was just, inundated with the way that this role playing stuff that my family had me playing my whole life, as well as this necklace of garbage that my mother had put around my neck, that it was an imaginary necklace, but it was this necklace that my mom especially had put there, and I guess my other abusers too, my dad and my brother, but mainly my mother, it was horrible. And I ripped that necklace off and I threw it on the ground. I said, I don't have to wear that anymore. I don't have to wear that anymore. I don't have to be those things that they told me that I was. I don't have to be any of those things. I know I'm who I am. I'm none of those things. So, that's exactly what I did, was start to change the way I felt about myself, looking at myself, who I really am, not who they made me feel or how they made me feel or who they said I was, So that helped me out a lot. And I did really a lot of work on that, especially with John Bradshaw's books and Robert Burney. the codependency, the dance of wounded souls. That's really good info. Robert Burney has a website called Joy to Me and You. I think it's Joy, Joy, the number 2, MEU, Joy to Me and You, and or Robert Burney, Burney. You can look that up. And those are great websites, really looking at, what are these issues of as this adult survivor, that this abuse, no matter what kind it was, sets us up to play these horrific roles that we don't have to keep playing as adults, So, I'm so glad that I went through those books and actually got that information. Very thankful because it helped me to see what I was doing, that I was continuing on, perpetuating this cycle of abuse, and playing these roles that I had no business playing anymore. So it's quite interesting. So let's see. What do we want to move on to now? How much time do we have? 10 minutes. We'll look at, that's the end of that article, but that's really good, and that's from the attitude section from HAVOCA, HAVOCA, Information for Survivors. That's really good, and I like that. Next, I want to look at from their website, feelings, and we'll just start the very, very beginning of it, and then we'll move on, because we've only got about 10 minutes. This is a section that they've got feelings, and this kind of has, I think, a lot to do with this inner, critical parent voice, dealing with our feelings, right? It says, initially, facing your innermost feelings will be extremely painful. It is probably the most difficult area you will have to deal with in your healing process. And they said men find this particularly difficult because as young adults, they were conditioned to think rather than feel. So both sexes, however, will find this stage immensely rewarding and will be relieved by letting the pressure out. So the important thing when coming to terms with your feelings is to still remain in touch with your thoughts. So they will help to balance the strong feelings which at first may overwhelm you. So by maintaining a positive thought process but allowing your feelings to be explored, you will soon be able to communicate your feelings and release the years of tension. It says all the above may sound like psychobabble, but believe me, by feeling rather than thinking, you will come to terms with your abuse far quicker. So think of an occasion when you had an argument with a loved one. It was never really resolved until you told that person how you felt. It would have gone on for ages by just thinking through the problem. By feeling, you solve the disagreement far quicker. Still not convinced? Try it next time. They said here, next time you have an issue with your loved one. For example, they say here, I don't like the way you talk to me. I think it sounds patronizing. Don't do it again. Try, I don't like the way you talk to me. It makes me feel very small, which in turn makes me feel defensive and angry. So what do you think here's another one, what do you think you're doing? And then the next one says, why are you doing that? It makes me feel sad. So it just sounds crazy, I know, but it works, trust me. So these are things that we can do. I know I've done a lot of, like I said, a lot of work, especially in this workbooks, with John Bradshaw, and also now I'm working on this Allender book, this Wounded Heart, and Hope for Adult Victims of Childhood Sexual Abuse. And there's a workbook there, and it does. There's a section, on each piece of it that actually tells you to go ahead and write down your feelings, exactly how you're feeling, and it is helpful. It's very, very helpful, because I'm actually surprised when I go back and look at it that I didn't even realize I was feeling some of those things, right? And so, which is interesting because I'm trying to actually get in touch with my feelings especially about the CSA, child sexual abuse. And because that happened when I was 8 and I shoved it down so that I could deal with more abuse in my home. And I was being abused anyway, physically and every other way. So it was a safety mechanism, shut that down, shut that off, just to survive more abuse, right? And so I'm trying to get in touch with those feelings so that I can heal, right? Make progress, right? It's very difficult. So, yeah, they said here, sometimes arguments are totally unrelated to the current situation. It's easy to bottle up your feelings and then lash out at a boiling point. And this is when you can use your thinking skills to rationalize the problem and talk about what led up to your outburst. And this inability to communicate feelings leaves tensions and hidden anger that can manifest themselves later in life. So they said as an adult victim of child abuse, you have probably buried these feelings very deep into your subconscious, and they could be near or past the boiling point. So learning to come to terms with these feelings will allow the release of this tension. So that's quite interesting, and we'll pick up the rest there on Monday. The reason I think that's interesting is because before my mom died, it was all about my mom. Really, it was all about pleasing my mom. We were always trying to keep our mother alive, really. And it started when I was before I was born, okay? I'm the last of 7 children, so my parents were horrific to each other the whole time they were married. They never really were happily married. And by the time I came around, the family was already destroyed, so it was just more destruction. So I just grew up in I call it a hellhole. That's why I actually created a website called Born in Hell, and to actually, tell, the world what it's like to be born into abuse in the womb, from the womb up, right? So absolutely horrible. And we were always worried about my mother. It was all about my mother, right? My mother was my main abuser, but it was all about keeping her happy, Not, and I'm not talking about happy. I'm talking about keeping her alive, as well as anything she said went, because she was so beaten down by the time I came around that the only person that she could really control was me, the little baby in the house, right? And so, the other kids were all much older than me. The next sibling next to me was 5, and my mom had a special kind of a relationship with her. She did slap my sister around and mistreated her, called her names and stuff, but she didn't treat her like me. She didn't abuse her horrifically like she did me, and she kind of felt sorry for my older sister for some reason and sort of left her alone, and I was the target. So, but it was all about my mom. She had a lot of support. She had, then my parents were brought up on abuse charges, and she could have got out. She could have left my dad. She didn't want us. She didn't want these children, but they got busted on child abuse charges. And to make the courts think that she was a good mother because she didn't want to look like a bad mother, she kept us. She begged the courts, don't take my children. And then she could use that on us later. I loved you and I wanted you. And this is the thanks I get, while she's beating on us, or whatever she's screaming at us. It was a horrific situation. So, when I left my abusers behind at the age of 29, left the country, actually got away from them 2,000 miles. I was like, I'm gone. That's when the feelings started to come up, because before that it was all about the safety mechanisms that I had and the walls that I had put up to be able to survive around my crazy, psychologically, mentally ill, abusive parents, right? And so even I had never worked on any of it. So when I left my abusers, I knew that stuff was going to boil. It was starting to boil, and the following year is when I recognized that the boiling pot was just about ready to boil over and spill out. But I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't consider myself to be an abuse survivor. I just knew what I had been through. I wasn't walking around going, oh, I'm a survivor of abuse, right? Or survivor of child abuse, right? So I didn't know what to do with it. Didn't know how to even deal with it. And it did boil over in a horrific situation, because at the age of 42, I was contemplating suicide. So 12 years later, of dealing with these horrific rage, anger, disappointment, rejection, just so hurt and so wounded from never being allowed to feel anything that I needed to feel about the abuse, the physical abuse, the verbal abuse, the emotional and psychological abuse, the sexual abuse, watching my dad rape my mother, horrific stuff, what they did to my brothers and what my brothers did to themselves because of the abuse, just this lifetime of complete hell, and then I got to try to make it in the world. I'm like, oh my God, you know what I mean? I used to be a drug user. I always want to go back to that, because I'm thinking, well, that's probably where I need to be, because that's where I deserve to be, man. That's where I came from a gutter, and so I've got all this stuff, and what do you do with it? I started writing. And I started allowing myself to feel the things that I needed to feel through my pen, through the paper, through the computer, whatever. And that was very, very, very helpful, right? Because until then, I wasn't allowed to feel anything, because I was beaten as a child. If I cried or expressed anything about the abuse to my mother, then she would beat me up, right? And my dad, he was my abuser too, but my mom was my main abuser, like I said. So feeling the feelings, very, very interesting. So we'll pick up where we left off there next time on Friday. And positive reinforcement. What can I do to help myself right on my daily walk? Instead of looking at negatives, looking at the positives. We went a little long on that section there. Well, first of all, just be good and kind to yourself. That's what this weekend I was very good and kind to myself because of it being Mother's Day, which I don't handle very well. So, I was good to myself, and I was kind to myself, and I wasn't harsh on myself, and didn't put too much pressure on myself. And I would say that's what we could do this week. Just be good to ourselves, and get the rest that we need, do the things that we need to do daily to take care of ourselves, breathe, get some information. There's lots of free information out there for people who are survivors of child abuse, especially any type of abuse. And what I do is I pick little pieces and I read it, allow myself to work through things, when I need to. I don't put pressure on myself to do it. And just, slowly work on this thing and not put pressure on ourselves. It's just too easy to do that, right? And if you're struggling and having a hard time, like I say on all my shows, you reach out and get some help. And do not struggle on your own. I didn't trust counselors, therapists, and all that, so I went anonymous group support. That was much better for me. And it really was helpful, very helpful, to talk to other people who have been through similar experiences and who share the commonality of being abused, right? So it was very validating, and it helped me out a lot. So I would say, even if you don't trust a counselor, therapist, whatever, there's anonymous group support out there, and all kinds of stuff for people. Just don't suffer on your own, and don't give up. Not ever. That's my main message. Just keep looking for that information that's going to help you. Keep looking for what's going to help you, and you stick this out with me. And I wish you a wonderful day and the rest of your week. We'll talk to you on Friday. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
A few things to know before you fly WestJet to Nashville. You don't need cowboy boots to have a great time in Nashville. You don't need a cowboy hat either. You don't even need to be a country music fan. To have a great time in Nashville, you just need to go to Nashville. WestJet can certainly help with that, with great low WestJet fares nonstop from Calgary to Nashville. Visit WestJet.com or call your travel agent.